Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, money, money.
Dollar, dollar. Dollar, dollar.
Welcome back to another episode of the Easy Dubs podcast. This week we are covering college football, week one. I know I'm excited. I love football, and football season is really what we look forward to the whole year. Even though some of us are starting school like me, others are just focused on kind of grinding out the next couple of months and enjoying the season. This week we have on Curbside Sports. We got at Sports Curbside on Twitter.
Yeah, thank
Curb,
you,
thanks for
Easton. I'm
coming
pumped
on.
to be here.
Yeah, no, this should be a good episode. I know week one, especially with college football, is a little bit of a shit show since we're kind of going with just, media talk and information
Yeah.
we've kind of gained over the summer. Obviously the transfer portal has come into play a lot more the last few years. So we're seeing a lot of changes across college football, coaches switching teams, players switching teams. It feels a little bit like the NFL in that way, but I think this should be a really fun episode as we kind of just go through a little bit of the slate, talk about some teams that maybe are teams to watch this season. Let's just have some fun. But I'm going to start it off. Let's just go with a little bit of your background. How'd you get into handicapping? Kind of what's your origin of college football capping, and where are we going from here?
Really, for me, just to get into capping was just playing sports my entire life, loving the analytics side of it. I have an analytics major from college. Just kind of loving to learn the underground, the real information and numbers that go along with these games and the outcomes of these games.
Yeah, no, I think when it comes to sports handicapping, a lot of our cappers are the same in that they're just, they're just like us. They're like guys that just love watching sports, love to play sports, kind of sports nerds who just like to dive a little bit deeper than maybe kind of the casual fan. So it's always fun talking to different guys and seeing where they come from. But obviously, as an analytics major, that helps you kind of obviously dive a little bit more into the numbers. Let's just start it off with the slate. I think this is going to be a great slate this week. Obviously, teams are going to be ranked kind of in the wrong spots sometimes, especially going into the season. But start off with a game that, again, is personal bias because one of my best friends played at Michigan, but Michigan, Colorado State. I know it looks like a blowout. I think the line is like 31 points or something like that. But it is an interesting battle because we got the two quarterbacks with Michigan, and I'm just curious to hear kind of what your thoughts are on that game and maybe, what people should look out for when betting this game.
Usually with week one games, especially when it's a big conference like the Big Ten, going up against a smaller conference, whoever that may be, I usually just look at how are the Big Ten and the big conference teams going to utilize their players, especially here with Jim Harbaugh having to decide between, is it McNamara and is it McCarthy? I think the other one. I think McNamara's starting this week, and then McCarthy's next week. So kind of how the only really thing I dove into here is McNamara's going to have to show out. He wants to earn that spot. He wants it for the rest of the year. This isn't one of those games where I think Michigan, coming off of a huge year last year, they're going to let Colorado State hang around. I think they're going to attack in the air, and I think they're just going to take control over that defense and kind of establish that passing game early.
No, I think I completely agree with that. I mean, last year it felt like Michigan was definitely more of a running team. I mean, they were just loaded in the backfield with Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins. I mean, those guys were just absolute studs back there. I mean, they were four deep, it felt like, at running back. But now we're looking at a quarterback battle. It puts a lot more things into play. Cade was good last year, but he wasn't anything special. He kind of just he seemed like he had his moments. He had his moments for sure. And then you look at JJ, who's again top recruit out of high school. Dude's got some, I mean, serious talent. He can run, he can throw. I think he's really, really pushing this year to be the starter. A lot more than last year. I think Cade was kind of the solidified starter. JJ kind of was a little bit of the gadget guy. So I'm really interested to see, because I know Harbaugh has had some talk where he said, maybe we'll put both of them in, they'll maybe kind of swap, and, obviously they're kind of going first game, second game, but it feels like there's a good chance they both play in both games. And we get to see them kind of against a couple of different defenses, even though it's, maybe weaker opponents, but it could be a good kind of show of what they might end up being the rest of the season. There's probably not much more with that game. I think what you said about the quarterbacks, that's really important. I don't even know if you've looked at Colorado State. I can't imagine many people are. They're kind of, again, No, not as much.
When
Not
it's
as
a big
much.
spread like that,
Well, this.
I usually want to look at a team's team total, especially with Michigan. Like we talked about the quarterback battle, they're going to be pushing the offense. They're going to air raid. Um, I mean, whether or not they win, I mean, a team could with this big of a spread, you blow them out, but you only win by 28 points, but you scored say 52 points and you still don't cover. I mean, so looking at the team total, especially with an offense like Michigan and Cade that's coming out with something to prove, it's definitely a good look, especially, I mean, yeah, just with how much they have to prove and show here.
Yeah, I think what you're saying with KJ Jefferson is we saw it a little bit last year where, he definitely had his moments where he was
Yeah,
as electric as they came. I mean, he was running all over the place, he was throwing the ball well. I think another year in the system, another year of maturity, I think there's a good chance he could
yeah,
end up having a really good year, like you're saying. And then I think we go to Cincinnati and two quarterbacks, and I think the old adage is, if you have two
yeah,
quarterbacks, you really don't have any quarterbacks. And so, maybe it's just maybe they're both solid and maybe
yeah.
there's a good battle going, but it also could be one of those where it's like, well, we just need a guy to fill the spot rather than,
Right.
oh, we
That's
love this guy
exactly.
filling this spot. So, um, you know, I think it's going to be really interesting to see this week. I think this will be, again, having Cincinnati start off, especially after last year,
Yeah,
getting their asses handed to them in the semis. I think it's going to be really interesting to see if they come out with that, with a little bit of anxiousness and wanted to really push it against a really good, a
yeah,
pretty good Arkansas
yeah,
team. At least we expect them to be a good team. I don't know. I'm excited for that game. I think any top 25 matchups
yeah.
early in the season are always fun, especially when it's between two like SEC versus AAC. You're mixing in different conferences. Smaller conference, bigger conference. Maybe a lower tier team in the big conference and a top tier team in the smaller conference. So
Yeah, I
really
love it.
interesting matchup.
I do give it to, I love Luke Fickle. I know he's going to come with something to stop KJ Jefferson. I think they will attempt to contain him. I don't know what they'll do about it, but Arkansas also brings in Jaden Hasselwood, um, transfer from Oklahoma, expected to be the top target
Mm,
receiver for Arkansas. So it does give KJ Jefferson another option. I just don't think Cincinnati's going to be able to score
mhm.
to keep up with Arkansas. So the 6 point spread kind of was easier lean for me, easier pick for me. Make it a 13.5, 14 point spread, then it gets a little bit different just because that Cincinnati defense and defensive line could be very strong again.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
one touchdown, I mean, it's not that much. And it's less than a touchdown too, right? You're getting that
Yeah.
extra point where you're like, okay, 7, 7 maybe you're a little bit more conscious about it, but 6 it's like it feels like 6 is going to be a pretty easy number to cover. I
Yeah.
don't disagree with that. All right, let's keep rolling. I'm loving this. I think we're getting a lot
Yeah.
of good information going. Um, One of my favorite games of the week. I grew up a
Okay.
huge Oregon Ducks fan. And I think they are going to get smushed. I think Georgia is going to put them in their place a little bit and show them who's boss. But it's a pretty big spread. I think it was right around
Yeah.
16 and a half,
Yeah.
17 when I last checked, which is significant, especially with Georgia losing, I think it was 15 pieces or
15 of the
something. They lost a
draft, 8 of them
lot
on
of
defense.
players in the draft. Yeah, 8 of them on defense, and a lot of them were again some
Right.
of the best guys in the draft. So I think Oregon Georgia, huge game, big spread.
Yeah.
What do you
So
think?
it's Dan Lenning, um, defensive coordinator for Georgia last year, led them to be the best defense in the country, is now the head coach at Oregon, um, which I think makes this game that much more fun to watch. I think it's going to be super exciting. Um, but you got Stetson Bennett and Brock Bowers coming back, and that the play action and rollout between a quarterback and a tight end that's that good um, is just hard to stop. And I don't know. Oregon has I forget his first name, Sewell at linebacker, who I think will be one of the better linebackers this year
Mhm.
in the country. But
Yeah.
I just don't think. I think Bo Nix is going to be the starter. Lenning won't announce it. He's trying to keep it all secret, but I think it will be Bo Nix. And he's never beaten Kirby Smart in Georgia. I don't think he's that guy that's going to do it. I think Georgia's defense stays strong even with losing those guys. The recruiting's too good. And then Georgia's offense will roll, is what I have.
Yeah, I mean, come on. It's watching Georgia last year, they were just
Oh, yeah.
so dominant. I mean, they were just so good. Obviously, you again, like we said earlier, you're
Mhm.
losing a lot of pieces, but you know, with a lot of those with those big SEC teams, Georgia, Alabama, you're able to,
Yeah,
you know, kind of recover. You're able to return. You're able to, you know, you lose a guy, but then you put in a guy that's, you know, maybe just a couple years younger and maybe a little
yeah,
bit more athletic. Who knows? Who knows? I mean, it's a lot of pieces to replace, but you know, we have seen that Kirby's done a
yeah,
really good job recruiting. I feel like the one place that they've missed a little bit is maybe
yeah,
at quarterback, and Stetson won a national championship, so
yeah,
you got to give him a little bit of credit. And I think what you're saying with Brock Bowers, I mean, he's one of the best tight ends we've seen over the last few years, and he was their leading receiver last year by a significant amount. And now he's coming back, and it's like, well, yeah, they've got to you got to imagine they're
yeah,
going to dominate a little bit. I don't know what the rest of the pieces look like on that offense, but you got to imagine that they've got, you know, maybe they've got a couple of, you know, young sophomores, a couple of freshmen coming up that are speedsters where, you know, Stetson can get it in their hands
yeah,
and just let them work. I think, you know, all he's got to do is kind of let the offense do its thing, and we know the
yeah.
defense is going to be solid. And so, you know, I don't really trust
No,
Bo Nix very much. I mean, we saw him in that one game
yeah,
against Oregon a couple years ago. It was
yeah,
kind of his big moment, but now that he's at Oregon, you know, they always have playmakers. They definitely have some good pieces on defense, but I think they've got, you know, maybe more superstars than they've got, you know,
yeah,
really a built out team. I think what
mhm,
you said with Sewell, I don't know. You know, that's Panay Sewell's brother, and
yeah,
he was highly recruited out of high school, and
yeah,
he's been a stud since he's been there. But they lost Thibodeau, and Thibodeau
yeah,
was a big piece on the edge. So I think there's a lot to look for there. But I think going with Georgia
yeah,
is never a bad plan. I feel like it might be a lower scoring game,
yeah,
at least in my opinion. Maybe that's coming from the wrong perspective, but I feel like maybe Georgia doesn't score a ton.
yeah.
Maybe
My
Oregon doesn't
initial
score a ton.
thing was, I think Lenning is going to come out and he's going to hammer the box. I think they're going to shut down the run, and then they're going to stick Sewell on Bowers to follow him with any play action. And I think that game plan is going to be fine. Um, but then it gets into the second half, or even maybe late in the second quarter, and just the athleticism, just the power of Georgia is just going to kind of take over. Do they get those 17 points if Oregon keeps it within 3 at halftime? I don't know, but I don't think that Oregon's offense is going to be able to score. So as long as Georgia can get it in the end zone, I think the 17 is an easy cover.
Okay. All right. I don't disagree with that. I think
Yeah,
it's another interesting one where it's like it feels a little big, but when you're looking at Georgia, it's
right,
like, is that
right,
really that much? I don't know. I don't know. It's not the Chip Kelly offense that we saw, you know, in the early
right.
2010s of Georgia, of Oregon. You know, it's a completely different team. Obviously, they're switching coaches,
Yeah,
which is a big change. You know, I mean, Cristobal was doing a great job there, but I think switching coaches, it definitely changes a little bit of kind of how the organization runs and how, you know, how
yeah,
they're able to function in the first few weeks. Um, well, good analysis. Now we're getting into probably the biggest game of the week. I think, you know, two top five teams. We're talking about Notre Dame, Ohio State. I've never liked Notre Dame. I've been watching the Manti
no,
Te'o
yeah,
documentary recently, but I've always had a little bit
mhm,
of hatred for Notre Dame, and I can't say I love Ohio
yeah,
State either. So I can't really lean in either direction.
yeah.
What do you think? Maybe we just
No,
stay
so
away from this game.
I don't love the 17. I get struggle with laying that many points a lot of the times, which I'll end up usually teasing two teams like this and getting it down to maybe a -7 or even a -10. Um, but I think Ohio State will have the best offense in the country this year. With CJ Stroud coming back, you saw what Oregon did to them
Mm-hmm.
in the horseshoe opening or week 1 last year. Came in, upset them. I don't think that happens this year. I don't think Notre Dame is a team that has that kind of. They have the athletes. I just don't think they're going to be able to string it together to keep up with the Ohio State offense. Um, you got Smith and Jigba. You have Julian Fleming in the receiver. Then you got Henderson at running back still. So there's so many athletes for Ohio State that you can hit. The thing is that kind of I struggle with, just like with Georgia. I don't think if they get off to a big start and they're getting the ball in the end zone, Ohio State last year I know was for the most part slow start. Uh, I don't know if you can catch back up and get those 17 points back. Um, but if they throw the ball, I think they're going to be fine. Notre Dame has, I think it's Buckner at quarterback. He's a dual threat guy, true dual threat. I don't think Ohio State will have any trouble containing him. I think the defensive line is going to be good, but it definitely brings a different kind of game into here. It's not like you're not just containing the pass and coverage, but it's more of a you got to protect it, or you got to watch the quarterback and protect that quarterback run. Which I think if Ohio State shuts that down, I don't think it'll be a good game for Notre Dame.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes with a dual threat, you get a guy that, is electric and can run and throw, but sometimes the dual threat really means he's more of a runner
Right.
than he is a thrower. And then, maybe Ohio State limits that part of the game and then, can completely shut it down. Ohio State's always known to have good
Yeah.
corners and good safeties, right? That's always what they've come out with in the draft. They've always had just deep back there. So you have to imagine that they can shut it
Yeah.
down on the outside, and then if they're trying to run the ball the whole game against Ohio State, who's going to be just throwing it all over the field. I mean, we saw Smith and Jigba in the game against Utah in the
Oh
bowl
yeah.
game. I mean, they just lit him up. I mean, what he went for like a record. It was like
Exactly.
it's a joke. I mean, the fact that they sent 2 first rounders out in the draft and they've got the best receiver they had last year coming back. Is just kind of an
It's crazy.
anomaly. It feels a little bit like Alabama the last few years. It is crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And that team, I mean, CJ Stroud, I think he's got to be one of the front runners for the Heisman.
Yeah.
I think he's right up there with Bryce Young, and maybe Will Anderson if we would like to throw in a defensive player. But
Yeah.
no, I think Ohio State I think they're gonna run away with it. I think Notre Dame is just, who knows? I mean, maybe Notre Dame has a good year this year, but and maybe they have a really good year, but it just maybe I feel like the start against Ohio State is going to be a tough one. It's going to be a really tough one
Yep.
for them. I think it's going to be kind of a wake up call and really show them, Ohio State's back and they're ready to mess around. I think Michigan, losing to Michigan last year was tough on them, and I think they really felt that, and they felt like, all right, this is our year. I mean, that was one year, that was just something that happened. Now let's get back to top 4. Let's be a top 2. Let's be the number 1 team in the country, maybe. And I think they have a good
Yeah.
chance to do that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Ohio State they're electric. I can't say I love watching them win
yeah.
every week, but they're electric.
Yeah, and being a top 5 matchup,
I think
this game will probably end up being a decider as to whether Ohio State or Notre Dame gets into the playoff. So the 17.5, that's the only thing that kind of makes it a little more comfortable, is both teams, if they can get the chance to just run the score out, I think they will. My only worry is with that slow start for Ohio State's offense is they also are bringing in a new defensive installment. I'm not sure entirely the details of it, but it'll definitely be interesting to see how that comes out and how they hold up. But I would I'm very big on
I mean, especially
this being a blowout.
Anytime. Yeah. Even with, again, it's like hard when you're looking at top 5 matchups. It's like it's hard to predict a blowout, but when you see when you see what's returning and you see what you have to just work with the information you have. You can't prediction is all it is, and you're trying to predict off the best stuff, and we know what CJ Stroud can do. We know what that team is about. So I think and again, Notre Dame lost their coach, right? I mean, obviously it's like he took over kind of towards the end of the year, but you lose Brian Kelly, and you're kind of jumping into a little bit of a new game with them. So another really interesting game. I think that'll be fun. Marcus Freeman. Yep.
Yeah.
Marcus Freeman. Yeah. He kind of, I think he coached like the last game or something. I can't remember what it was, but
it was the last
he didn't do
game,
much.
Yeah.
He wasn't there for, like the last game.
Yeah.
Cause I think he was a D coordinator. All right, let's just keep working through. I think we don't need to cover too many games. We're really diving into these ones, but I think those are the fun ones. I think those are the ones that people are really going to be watching, the top 25 matchups. I do like this game, Utah and Florida, because you're going with Utah, who's very highly ranked to start the year, and then Florida, who maybe is a little bit further down, but is SEC, is Florida. Florida's got the track record, they got the legacy, they got the they got the players, they got the recruiting base, they got a lot of that going. So Utah, Florida, what do you think on that game?
Yeah, this was probably the hardest game for me to kind of pick a side on, just because I think on Monday, Florida sold out, so the Swamp's going to be packed. It's a cross-country travel for Utah, which is always tough. But what I kind of found interesting was Anthony Richardson's going to be the quarterback for Florida this year, who's already getting looks at possibly being a high first-round draft pick, Heisman runner or whatever, being in that competition. But he's a beast with great arm strength. Accuracy has had some questions to what I've seen, but I think he's going to be very fun to watch, and I think he can put on a show. But I do not like Florida's run defense at all. Utah's offense scored 35 touchdowns on the ground last year, and Florida's defense allowed 18 on the ground last year. So Tavion Thomas, running back for Utah, returns. I think he went for over 1,200 yards on the ground last year with 21 touchdowns. So he's a beast. If Florida can shut down the run, then I think Utah's in a lot of trouble, especially with how loud that stadium's going to be. But I don't know if they can stop it. The run defense was not very good last year. If Utah can just establish that early, get some play action, I think Cameron Rising is their quarterback. This is going to be an awesome game. I lean more on the over than I do a side, but if I did have to pick a side, it would be Utah.
Yeah, I think this is a game where we're looking at points. I think we're looking at a lot of points. I think it could be, like you said, the over is probably a good one to kind of hit, because I think it's going to be, two pretty electric offenses. We saw that Utah really can score. Their quarterback is he's sneaky good. He really is. He's a super solid player, and I think their run game, like you said, is returning a lot of guys, or definitely their starter in Thomas, and maybe a couple of the pieces behind him, and then you get Anthony Richardson in kind of in his full form, and hopefully he can really be that electric player that Florida's been hoping for, I think, the last year or two. But I think these are always fun games. Pac-12, SEC. We already talked about it with Oregon, Georgia. I think we're covering a couple of games that are maybe matchups we don't see that often, but fun matchups that are bringing a lot of intrigue, because it's like, well, what do these two teams look like playing against each other? We see them playing conferences.
Yeah.
We see Florida take on Alabama, but what does that look like when Florida takes on the best team, or one of the top few teams from the Pac-12, which obviously is kind of always seems like a little bit of a meddling conference. We are losing a couple of teams, even though it's UCLA and USC. It's still teams. It's still teams are wanting to leave the Pac-12 rather than come. Like SEC, they're wanting to come. We got Texas and Oklahoma going there, whatever, next year or so. And it's like, it's a completely different kind of atmosphere that those two kind of conferences go through, those teams are in. But I think it'll be a fun game. I think that'll definitely be a fun one to watch. High scoring, I think, is definitely the way to go.
I think.
Well, we covered a lot of the big games. I think those are fun. I think there's a couple other games we could talk about, but I think those are really the big ones. I really want to get your take a little bit more on maybe how teams maybe are going to look for the season. USC. I think USC is getting a lot of talk about maybe being a top 4 team, ending up in the playoff. I know they're starting right around, I think they're 14 is maybe where they started in the top 25. But you get Lincoln Riley, you get Caleb Williams, you get new system, new coach, winning team. What do we think? Do we like USC this year? Do we not like USC? Thoughts?
Yeah, I've never been big on Pac-12 football. I just think year after year they beat each other until a winner comes out of it. When's the last time we saw someone really dominate the conference? Probably has been a few years, I think, unless I'm forgetting something. But I love what USC's done.
Yeah, Washington in like 16?
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah.
But I love what USC's done. They have had a great kind of off season with the transfer portal. I was actually looking at the West Virginia and Pittsburgh game that's just in an hour or two. And I think their top receiver, I can't remember his name, is at USC now. So I think they're going to be very interesting to watch. I still have Utah as my favorite coming out of the Pac-12. But I think USC is going to be, I think those two are going to be the top. And you got Oregon kind of right behind. But I have high hopes for USC. I think they're going to do well.
I think USC is just, it's when you talk about USC, you're talking about, again, we always think about Reggie Bush, and we think about Matt Leinart, and we think about those years, Carson Palmer, those years where they had Heisman finalists, they were top 2 almost every year, all those battles they had kind of with Texas and some of those other teams. I think they were really fun. They were a really fun team to watch, and I think the last 10 or so years, we've kind of just hit a little bit of peaks and valleys, and
Yeah.
I think with the addition of Lincoln Riley, you're bringing in something that's maybe a little bit different. That could be, especially
Yeah.
if he puts it all together with the recruits, and maybe he can reclaim that Southern California base that's been lost a lot over the last few years.
Yeah.
And I think moving them to the Big Ten, it's going to be a completely different dynamic. And I think the
Yeah.
recruiting the next year or two is going to show what that means.
Yeah.
They're not recruiting for the Pac-12, even though they're still in it. They're recruiting to be a Big Ten team, and those players are going to be playing in the Big
Right.
Ten. They're not going to be fighting Utah and Oregon. They're going to be
Yeah.
fighting Ohio State, and Michigan, and
Yeah.
Michigan State, and Iowa, and all these big bruisers, Wisconsin, these big
Yeah.
old fuckers
Yeah.
from these big teams. These big schools in the Midwest, and it's going to be a completely different dynamic. I'm honestly really excited for. I hate USC. One of my friends plays at he plays baseball at USC, and I can't
No.
stand him talking about it. He's been a USC fan his whole life, and I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I don't need to hear it. I really don't need to hear it, but
Yeah.
I get it. I get it. They are the Trojans, and they are fun, and it
Yeah.
could
They
be a
got
really fun team to
excited
watch.
for.
Um, they got a lot to be excited for. I think USC is one of those teams that is a
Yeah.
complete unknown. Um, and like similar to maybe like how Miami is. I think Miami could be a
I,
really interesting team to watch with Cristobal going to Miami, and again, another powerhouse football team with the legacy and the history that, you know, if they find the right pieces, they find the right coach, maybe they start to reclaim that, that dominance where, in like Miami and Florida, and
mm,
USC in California. I think some of those teams kind of get lost
yeah.
sometimes in the shuffle, but with the way these conferences are changing and the way that NIL is changing college football, I think those
They're
teams
gonna
are going to have a
get
great
some.
chance to kind of
Mhm.
pick up a lot of guys, right? Yeah, pick up some of that stuff. Um, that's probably it from my end. I don't know if you got anything else. I'd love to hear some last thoughts. If there's any games that you love kind
Yeah.
of going into this weekend, love to hear them. I think we covered a lot of good games, but as a handicapper, you may have a
Yeah.
couple that you
So
really, really
every
like.
year I try to find a few kind of low key teams that no one's really sure about. Last year it was Coastal Carolina, and we got to ride a nice spread for most of the year. They ended up being great. Um, but this year I really like Miami, Florida, like you said, and I really like NC State. I am very excited to watch Devin Leary. I think
Mm,
he's going to be in the Heisman run. I think he's going to be awesome. Puts up crazy numbers, and then that kind of brings me to the game this weekend against East Carolina. East Carolina's been great at home, especially against Power 5 and top 25 teams. It feels like it's always miserable for teams to go in there. But um, yeah, the Pirates. I mean,
Pirates.
they got NC State's got 10
Pirates.
starters back on offense, 7 on defense. Defense was top 25 in total yardage,
Ooh,
top 15 in scoring. And then Dave Doran, head coach NC State, he's 2-2 against East Carolina, but won the last 2 meetings by 92-9 margin. I think Devin Leary throws for 400 plus yards, and NC State kicks it out of him at -11. I'm perfectly fine with that. I like the team total. I like the first. I love NC State this weekend. NC State,
hammer
NC State,
NC State, hammer the
all over it.
Wolfpack. Yeah. If you need some prop bets, yeah, give
No,
Leary 405 touchdowns, and I think you'll make
oh
a
yeah,
pretty
oh
penny
yeah.
on that
Put him
one.
down for everything.
I love that. I love that. I think NC State. I'm not. I'm not doing as much research as you are, but anytime I can hear NC State kind of coming out of the woodworks, I think it's fun, especially because they do have a little bit
Yeah.
of history of quarterbacks. Obviously, Russell Wilson spent a little bit of time there,
Mm.
even though he ended up at Wisconsin. But I think there's a lot of fun stuff with that team, and I think always rooting on a North Carolina team that's not Duke or North Carolina just because of
Yeah,
their basketball hatred, I think
100%.
is always a good thing. Um, yeah. Any other sleepers that to look out
Um,
for, or feel like NC State's kind of
NC
your
State's
team?
a team I like. I got to sleep. I got West Virginia tonight against Pitt. That's the game I was going through for most of the
Mm,
day today. I don't think I'll be able to get that out, but um, other than that, I mean, a lot of favorites I like. I haven't finished up my whole card, so I don't have many of the underdogs done. But definitely looking for them.
mhm. Well, I think that was great. I think we covered A hell of a
Yeah.
lot. That was a great episode. There's so much with college football. It's like, how do you hit every single part of the of the slate? I think it's really just trying to hit what people are going to be watching, the primetime games, the big time games. I know another game I'm excited to look forward to watch is Florida State LSU on Sunday. But we don't need to cover that. We've already covered enough. Curb,
Yep.
thank you so much. Again, you can find him on Twitter at Curbside,
Sports.
at
Sports.
Sports
Yeah.
Curbside.
Yeah.
There you go. I didn't want to mess that up. Curbside Sports Picks, but you have been
Yeah.
awesome. This has been a blast. I think anybody that watches this is going to have some great information, even though, could be for week one, could be for
Yeah.
kind of the season going forward. I think, there's a lot of teams that are going to be really interesting to watch and a lot of fun games this week to kind of get us
Fully ended.
really going, get us in the flow
Yeah.
of football season.
Oh,
Oh, boys, I'm ready.
I-
I'm ready and I'm excited.
very much.
I'm excited. So
Yeah.
thanks
Thank you,
so much for
Easton.
coming on.